In this video, we will learn together about Python and check whether or not Python is already installed on our system, and also install Python in text editor to help us understand Python code structure easily. Python is a high-level programming language, which means no need to compile your program before executing, as it's processed at runtime by the interpreter. The programming style and context in Python are also easier to learn and implement than low-level languages, as programmers can easily understand and interpret the language. A high-level language also doesn't require addressing hardware constraints when developing a program. However, every single program written in a high-level language must be interpreted into machine language before being executed by the computer. As a high-level programming, Python focuses more on the programming logic rather than the underlying hardware components. So, Python is designed to be used by the human operator or the programmer, as it's referred to as closer to humans. Then, we can conclude that Python is much more user-friendly in programming context and generally independent of the computer's hardware architecture. Compile is the creation of an executable program from code written in a compiled programming language, while compiling will allow the computer to run and understand a program without the need of the programming software used to create it. Then what means about compile time? It is the total time it takes a compiler to compile code into a program that can be run by the computer. Then in computing, a compiler is a computer program that translates computer code written in one programming language as the source language into another language as the target language. The name compiler is primarily used for programs that translate source code from a high-level programming language to a lower-level language. For example, assembly language, object code, or machine code to create an executable program. Programming languages are implemented in two ways: interpretation and compilation. As the name suggests, an interpreter will transform the code to machine code or into an intermediate language that can be easily executed and understood by machine, because an interpreter will act like a translator that repeatedly reads instructions one at a time and translates them to machine code. However, in programming, the interpreter is generally slower than a compiler, because it processes and interprets each statement in a program as many times as the number of the evaluations of the statement. The interpreter will read each statement of code and then converts or executes it directly. In contrast, an assembler or a compiler converts a high-level source code into native code that can be executed directly by the operating system, and in most cases, the compiler is preferable, since its output runs much faster compared to a line-by-line interpretation, and compilers tend to use memory more efficiently, rather than scanning the whole program and translating it into machine code like a compiler does. The interpreter translates code one statement at a time, but since an interpreter reads and then executes code in a single process, it's very useful for scripting and other small programs. As such, it is commonly installed on web servers, which run a lot of executable scripts. It is also used during the development stage of a program to test small chunks of code one by one, rather than having to compile the whole program every time. We can look that both compilers and interpreters have their advantages and disadvantages, and are not mutually exclusive. This means that they can be used in conjunction, as most integrated development environments employ both compilation and translation for some high-level languages, and both interpreters and compilers are written in some high-level programming language, and they are translated into machine code. For example, a Java interpreter can be completely written in C, or even Java. The interpreter source program is machine independent, since it does not generate machine code. This is the basic knowledge if you're going to use Python. First, Python is case sensitive. It means using uppercase or not will have different logic or meaning in Python. Then, Python idle is integrated development environment for Python, where you write the code. This is your interpreter and editor. And remember, everything in Python is an object, as later, you will meet what people said about object-oriented program. Python code also read your code from top, or first line to the bottom, or next line. And when you learn Python, sometimes Python code often contains references to the comedy group Monty Python. This is why the words spam and eggs are often used as placeholder variables in Python, where foo and bar would be used in other programming languages. So, As a high-level programming language, Python becomes easy to understand, debug, and maintain. It also can run on any platform, and it's been implemented in various areas such as scientific computing and artificial intelligence. In conclusion, we can see the benefit of learning Python, which is it is open source, free to install and use, and Python also has an active online community. The latest algorithms also come to Python in a matter of days. Moreover, what makes Python is very popular, because Python is easy to learn, and it can become a common language for data science and production of web-based analytics products.